I always believed that the cruelest wounds are inflicted not by life's accidents or strangers, but by those you considered close relatives. They know exactly where your weak spots are. They know how to hit where it hurts the most. I never even suspected that a simple birthday celebration for my son would turn into a memory that would stick with me forever. I woke up before the alarm went off. Outside the window, the sky was just starting to turn gray and the air carried the chill of early spring. There was something special about this morning. I realized today my boy was turning a year older, 7 years old, hard to believe. I was constantly afraid that after the breakup he would feel unwanted, pushed aside. So I made every effort to make him feel I'm here. It doesn't matter that I no longer share a roof with his mother. It doesn't matter that she has a new partner, a spacious cottage, her own rhythm of life. I'm still his parent. I checked the surprise, a giant package with a spaceship constructor set. I'd been hunting for it for months. It was sold out everywhere. When I found it, I rejoiced like a kid. I imagined how we'd assemble it in the evenings at my apartment, how he'd brag that this spaceship was given to him by his father. And of course, the cake. A few weeks ago, I placed an order at a bakery in the historic district. I described every detail to the pastry chef: chocolate sponge, thick glaze, figurines of comic book heroes that Lucas adores. And the key part, the inscription, "Happy birthday, Lucas," in large golden letters. I wanted it to leave a lifelong mark in his memory. I arrived at their villa closer to noon. The building looked like it was cut from a glossy magazine, vast, manicured park, light picket fence. I always felt like an outsider there, like it was a stage where I didn't belong. Marie opened the door. She looked impeccable as usual. Hairstyle perfect, outfit like from a storefront. We barely communicated, just exchanged forced smiles. "I put the cake in the kitchen," I said, entering. "It won't fit in the fridge, but it'll hold up fine." "Okay," she replied without even glancing. I spotted Pierre immediately. He was in the living room pouring juices into disposable cups. Tall, groomed, with a constant smug grin. He was my complete opposite. "Oh, Anton," he exclaimed as if we were best buddies. "Glad you stopped by. The kids are about to arrive." I nodded and headed to the kitchen to make sure everything was okay. And that's when my heart sank. The cake box was gone. I searched the counters, the freezer, even the pantry. Nothing. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd left it in the car, but I clearly remembered placing the box on the table when I came in. I went out to the garden, and that's when I noticed it. The light packaging with the bakery's logo sticking out of the waste container by the gate. I approached, not believing my eyes. I opened it. Inside was the cake, smashed, stuck together, but still recognizable. Pieces of the figurines clung to the glaze. On top, a fragment of the letter L was visible. The candles lay aside, broken. I froze, my mind buzzed. This couldn't be real. Months of preparation, months of anticipation, my gift for my son in the trash. "What are you digging around in there?" A voice came from behind. I turned. It was Pierre. He was holding a plate of snacks. His expression was serene, almost playful. "That's the cake," I choked out. "My cake for Lucas." "Ah, that one," he shrugged. "We thought it, wasn't the best. We got another one." "Not the best?" I couldn't believe it. "Do you have any idea how much I put into this?" "Anton," he said almost gently, "calm down, it's just a cake. The main thing is that the kids are happy, they don't care." I wanted to respond, to yell, but at that moment the door slammed and Lucas burst out onto the terrace. His face was glowing. "Dad, you're here. Look, they gave me a little car." He ran to me with a bag, laughing. He was beaming with joy, and I realized I had no right to ruin his celebration now. I couldn't start a conflict in front of him. I put the packaging back in the container, plastered on a smile, and bent down to my son. "Of course I'm here, kiddo," I promised. But as he hugged me, inside I was burning. Images from the past flashed before my eyes. Our divorce with Marie was calm only on paper. In reality, it was a battle. She claimed I was too busy with work and rarely home. I countered that she was always dissatisfied and looking for a reason to leave. When Pierre appeared, I understood. She hadn't been with me for a long time, and I gave up. Gave up the house, peace, family, but most of all, I feared losing my son. I agreed to any terms just to see him. Payments, schedules, weekend visits. I endured her detachment, endured his smirk, for Lucas. And now here I was by the trash bin with a ruined cake that was supposed to make my son happy. And for the first time in many months, I realized this battle wasn't over yet. The living room was filled with noise. Kids were running among balloons, firecrackers popping, laughter ringing out. In the corner stood a giant multi-tiered cake covered in colorful cream flowers. On it shone the inscription, "Happy birthday, champ, with love, Mom and Pierre." I froze when I saw it. My cake was rotting in the trash, and here was this pompous, sweet construction, and even the inscription like a stab to the heart. From Mom and Pierre, as if I didn't exist. Lucas naturally was thrilled. The kids squealed, clapped when the candles were blown out, but inside me it was boiling. "Is that his father?" came from somewhere on the side. "Yeah, that's him. They split a couple of years ago." Well, no surprise. I felt the stares. The parents of the other kids exchanged glances. Some whispered about me, as if I were an uninvited guest at this event. I tried to focus on my son. He was devouring the dessert, treating his friends, laughing. I saw he was ecstatic. But the longer I watched, the sharper the feeling grew inside that I wasn't there. I was extraneous. When the kids ran off to the garden to play, I approached Marie. "You could have at least hinted that the cake wasn't needed," I said in a whisper. "I wouldn't have brought it." She set her glass on the counter and stared straight at me. "Anton, stop exaggerating. It's just a cake. We threw a party, the kid's happy. Isn't that the main thing?" "The main thing is that you're erasing me from his life," I snapped. "Everything I do is an obstacle to you." Marie smirked slightly at the corner of her mouth. "Maybe because you're always trying to prove you're better. You don't realize that stability is more important than your impulses." I wanted to argue, but then Pierre approached, placed his hand on her shoulder and looked at me. "Anton, let's not have any drama, okay? It's a kid's party. No need to spoil the mood." I clenched my fists but stayed silent. Later, when everyone was eating, I went out to the garden with Lucas. We sat on the swings, him munching on a treat. "So how's the party?" I asked. He grinned and nodded. "Cool, it's just a shame we didn't try your cake." I froze. "How do you know?" "I saw it in the bin," he said simply. "Pierre said it was ugly and we wouldn't serve it." I felt everything collapse inside. I tried to smile, but my voice trembled. "And how did you feel?" Lucas shrugged. "I know you tried, Dad. I don't care what the cake is like, you're still the coolest." Those words were like a lifeline, but at the same time, like a verdict. I realized this wasn't an accident, it was deliberate, to erase me, to show here I'm nothing. When I returned to the house, I already knew what to do. I was no longer going to be compliant. I was no longer going to stay silent for the sake of peace. This was a battle, and I intended to win it. Marie was still nearby, holding a wrapper with cake crumbs, and I felt the space around me shrinking into a narrow corridor through which I could barely breathe. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding so hard that each beat echoed in my ears. I couldn't accept that this day, my son's birthday, had turned into such a horrific farce. "You see this, right?" Marie asked quietly, as if afraid that what was said would shatter the illusion of harmony around. I nodded, but the words stuck in my throat. I wanted to scream, demand explanations, but instead I froze, as if glued to the asphalt. How could it happen that your own son is at a party and his cake is in the trash? Memories flooded in suddenly. I saw his glowing face at last year's celebration when I personally cut the cake, laughed with him, listened to his childish jokes. And now that image clashed with the cruel reality. A piece of chocolate cake, covered in dust and small scraps of trash, lay before me like a symbol of what I'd lost control over in his life. He said he wanted a real birthday," Marie muttered. "I tried to explain to him that it was silly, but he insisted." I sat down heavily on the bench by the bin, feeling every passerby's glance like a slap. This wasn't just a mistake. The feeling of betrayal mixed with helplessness made the suffering almost physical. I remembered how last week he drew me a card. "Dad, you're my hero." And now, looking at the cake remnants, I realized that for someone, I might be a complete stranger. Why did he do that?" I finally said, my voice trembling. "Why did he reject me even on his holiday?" Marie looked at me with eyes full of remorse. "Kids sometimes do strange things when they feel tension. He doesn't understand that you were trying to be close." I wanted to believe it, but pain tore at my soul. I saw his friends laughing, celebrating, as waiters served fancy cakes and drinks, and he, my son, chose the trash cake as if it meant something significant. Inside me, two impulses battled, anger and despair, and I didn't know which prevailed. Maybe he just wanted me to realize, I said quietly to myself, to understand how little time I spent with him. Marie placed her hand on my shoulder. Maybe, but right now the main thing is not to boil over. We need to act. I took a deep breath and started picking up the cake. It was all dirty, crumbs falling to the ground, sticking to my fingers. It felt like with each shard I was losing a piece of myself, but I couldn't just leave. I wanted to fix something. Come on, I said, holding the cake like a relic. Let's go to him. We walked to the villa where the party was going on, and I tried to gather my thoughts. How to explain to my son that I knew what happened. How to prove that I'm still his father, even if his own friends and loved ones don't notice. When we entered, the melodies and laughter tore at my thoughts. I saw him at the table with the boys around. He noticed me and froze for a moment. In his eyes, mixed surprise and fear, as if he understood that I'd learned too much but hadn't grasped everything yet. Dad, he said quietly. I approached him, placed the dirty cake on the table, carefully brushing off the crumbs. I know what you did, I said, trying to keep my tone even. I know this is your way of saying you're missing something. He looked at me, not believing that I could be there after everything. His small shoulders shook, his eyes filled with moisture. He began but couldn't finish. I knelt down in front of him. Listen, I understand. It hurts me to see this cake in the trash, but that's not important. What's important is that we're together. I extended my hands, and he gradually, hesitantly, placed his tiny palm in mine. Marie stood a little distance away, watching this, and I felt her support. I knew that now wasn't the time for reproaches and screams. Now was the time for understanding. Dad, he said finally, I wanted you to notice that I can choose myself, what's important to me. I smiled through the moisture. I see, and I'm proud of you, but let's never throw away a cake again, okay? He nodded, and for a moment the world became normal again. But I realized this was just the start of a path where we'd learn to understand each other, listen to each other, and cherish every moment. After the party, we stayed alone, cleaning up the cake remnants and talking about what happened. I shared stories from my childhood with him. He shared impressions from school. We laughed and cried at the same time, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could become part of his world again. In the morning, I saw a clean sheet on the table with a drawn cake and the caption, "Dad, thank you." My soul clenched with delight. This was a sign that the bridge between us was starting to strengthen. And even if this day started as a horror, I realized one key thing. Sometimes the most bizarre, most painful situations become the point from which you can start anew. The days following that failed celebration were filled with a strange silence. I tried to restore contact with my son, but every word I said, every step seemed insufficient. He was wary, as if afraid to be disappointed again, and I, in turn, feared making another mistake. I often sat alone, holding the fragments of that cake that we never saved, and tried to comprehend how it all happened. I asked myself questions with no easy answers. Why did he prefer the trash over the celebration? Why didn't I catch his inner feelings earlier? And then one evening, when the house was plunged into twilight and the air carried the scent of old candles and vanilla, my son approached me with a tiny box in his hands. His eyes sparkled in the dim light, but there was determination in them. Dad, he began quietly, I want to show you something. I leaned in and he carefully opened the box. Inside rested a small piece of cake, neatly wrapped in foil. He looked at me with hope and slight anxiety. This is that cake I hid, he said. I wanted you to see what's important to me, but I didn't want you to be angry. My soul clenched with pain and at the same time with jubilation. This tiny gesture said more than any words. I realized that my son was trying to convey his emotions to me, but he had no other way. I understand, I said, trying to keep my tone even, and I'm proud of you for your courage. He smiled with relief, and for a moment the world around became serene and quiet. But inside me many feelings still boiled, guilt, regret, tenderness, and hope. Dad, he continued, I want us to do something together so that this day never feels so strange again. I nodded, feeling something change inside. We decided to throw a miniature second celebration, just me, him, and Marie. We bought a fresh cake, decorations, balloons. This time, everything was truly ours, without outsiders' eyes and unnecessary noise. When I watched him blow out the candles and make a wish, I realized that the true value of the celebration isn't in the cake, not in the surprises, but in the moment we share. After that day, our bond strengthened. We started communicating more often, discussing his feelings and joys. I listened, and he shared. Sometimes it was small stories from school, sometimes deep thoughts about friendship and honesty. But the real test still lay ahead. One day he came home with a message from school. His eyes shone with a mix of excitement and worry. "Dad, this is important," he said. "I think you should look." I took the message and started reading. It was a confession from one of his friends who felt offended because my son hadn't invited him to the celebration. The child's feelings were sincere, and I saw that, despite all our efforts, the consequences of that cake incident hadn't gone away yet. "We need to do something," I said, feeling responsibility not only for my son but also for his friends. "Let's write an apology letter together." He agreed, and we sat at the table. Together we wrote, choosing every word, trying to express real emotions. It wasn't easy, but we managed. When the message was ready, he proudly sealed it in an envelope. "Dad, thank you for being close," he said, hugging me. "I now understand that you always tried to be a good father." I hugged him tighter, and I'm grateful that you gave me the chance to fix my mistakes. This day became a fresh start for us. We realized that the most important thing is sincerity, openness, and willingness to listen to each other. We learned that even the most painful moments can be turned into lessons and opportunities to get closer. Several weeks passed since that day, and every day we tried to pay attention to each other. Small pleasures, shared breakfasts, walks, evening stories became the foundation of our new life. And one evening, as we sat together watching the sunset from the window, my son turned to me and said, "Dad, I realized that a real celebration is when we're together. Even if the cake is in the trash, I'm still glad you're nearby." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my body. "Me too, son, me too." In that moment, I understood. The most precious thing we have isn't surprises or external attributes of celebration, but our connections, our emotions, and the ability to forgive and understand each other. We looked at the remaining piece of cake, and I suggested, "Want to eat it together right now?" He burst out laughing. "Let's." And we laughed, ate the cake, chatted, and felt that we had finally found what we'd lost, true understanding and closeness that would now be with us every day. Several months passed after that second, genuine celebration. Life gradually returned to its usual course, but every day reminded me that small events can have enormous significance. The moment with the cake became a symbol for my son and me, a symbol that real emotions are more important than external gloss and social norms. Marie was still around, quietly supporting us and watching as we gradually but confidently built a new reality. She often said, "See how much you can change just by being sincere and attentive." And I realized that there was deep truth in those words. Sometimes it seems like we're missing moments, but each one leaves a mark that reveals itself later in the most unexpected forms. One evening, my son approached me with a message that he held with unusual seriousness. His eyes sparkled, but this time not from worry, but from excitement. "Dad, I got this today at school," he said, handing me the message. I opened it and started reading. It was an invitation to a school event dedicated to friendship and support. The message noted that students who showed initiative and kindness would be recognized. Among them was my son. "Dad, this is thanks to you," he whispered. "I realized how important it is to be honest and care for others." My soul clenched with pride and jubilation. My eyes filled with moisture, but it was the moisture of happiness. I understood that even the smallest gestures, words, hugs, attention, can change destinies. Marie and I decided we would definitely go to this event together. It was a chance to show our son that we appreciate his efforts and support every step. At the school celebration, there was an atmosphere of delight and excitement. The kids laughed, exchanged stories, and the teachers handed out modest awards and diplomas. When it was my son's turn, I noticed he was slightly nervous. But when he stepped onto the podium, his face lit up with confidence. He received a diploma for kindness and initiative. "This is your victory, son," I said after the ceremony, hugging him. "You made the world around you better just by showing care." He smiled and whispered, "Dad, I realized, happiness isn't in what's outside, but in what's inside us." Those words made me freeze and think. We so often seek joy in things, forgetting that the true value is in people and connections. The tiny cake in the trash became a symbol that sometimes we see only the shell, missing the essence. Several more weeks passed, and we decided to organize a small family dinner to celebrate all our successes, new lessons, new bonds, and new discoveries. On the table stood a fresh cake, but this time it wasn't just a treat. It symbolized forgiveness, tenderness, and attention to what's important. As we sat at the table, my son said, "Dad, I want this cake to remind us that even if something goes wrong, there's always a chance to fix it." I nodded, feeling warmth spread through my entire body. "And I want us to always remember that," I said, "because it's these moments that make us stronger and closer to each other." We cut the cake together, laughed, recalled past funny and bizarre moments, and I realized that life is a chain of small miracles that form a huge picture of happiness. Sometimes you just need to pause, pay attention to the details, and be there for those you care about. The next day, my son came back from school full of stories about how he helped friends, supported classmates, and even organized a mini celebration for those who stayed in the shadows. I watched him and reflected on how one small incident with the cake triggered a chain of events that changed us all. "Dad," he said, approaching me, "thank you for being there. I realized that true strength is in love, forgiveness, and caring for others." I hugged him tightly and replied, "And I'm grateful to you for the lessons you've given me. You've made me better." From that moment, our life became a new page. We understood the value of every moment, every smile, every word. And even if difficulties arose, we knew we'd overcome them together, because now we had not only the cake, but also a strong, real bond between father and son. The story with the cake in the trash turned into a lesson for our entire family. We learned to notice small details, show care, and forgive mistakes, whether ours or others. We realized that every moment, no matter what, joyful or painful, leaves a mark that shapes the future. And although the cake was eaten, the lessons it taught remained forever. We learned to cherish each other, be sincere, and remember that small miracles happen every day if we're open to them and ready to see them in the most ordinary things. From that day on, we always tried to see value in simple things. A child's smile, a kind word, a shared moment. We realized that true miracles don't require grand celebrations. They happen in hearts and connections that we build. And so, on one ordinary evening, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, I sat next to my son, watching him draw something on paper, and thought, even if life throws strange trials, be it a cake in the trash or unexpected difficulties, the true value is always close. It's in love, attention, and the ability to be there for each other. I smiled. My son looked at me and said, "Dad, I think this was the best birthday of my life." And I realized that sometimes the biggest miracles are hidden in the smallest moments.